right, so just got the thumbs up to go ahead. Good evening. Hello. I'm Emma Mbeke Nzioka, and I'm very, very grateful for your sharing with us your time this afternoon. We are here to discuss something that you've probably heard me or other artists speak on, very, emotionally driven conversations around movement restrictions. And the title of this bubble is Animal Farm, Who Has Got the Right to Move Freely? So I introduced this space and that question as a point of reflection as we go on with this conversation. And the reason I picked this particular topic, which maybe some of you know, which I Googled also, is a story by George Orwell. I heard about the story about the animal farm when I was growing up. And it was very interesting that even when you have a quote unquote master, in this case, a human master, working and controlling the lives of his or her subjects, in this case, the animals, and the animals decide we are going to revolt. We want free movement, we want equality, we want to be free and happy. Even when that comes into play and the revolt happens on the animal farm, somehow things go wrong. And so we need to assess why it is we are calling for the freedoms of movement, the freedoms of access, of equality, of everything that we do. Why we're doing that, how we do it is also very important in the conversations that we have. So it's not enough to keep complaining that we're trying to move, but we're being restricted. It's when we do get that access, what are the foolproof ways to make sure that once we are out and we are free, things don't collapse? So yes, I welcome you to find the book and read it and keep meditating over it as we speak today. But I'm going to get into introducing our special guests here today, live in person in Bern and also live online. Hi, friends. And I have my laptop open so that I don't get anybody's name, position, or biography wrong. I'm going to start with Eric Otieno Sumba, who's here on our left. Eric is a writer, an editor, and an independent researcher with a background in social theory, political economy, post-colonial studies, and art criticism. He is currently the editor at Haus der Kulturen der Welt, the HKW. I don't know how my pronunciation was, but I tried my best, in Berlin. And recent editorial projects of Eric's include the O Colombismo album and the O Colombismo reader, both HKW archive books, as well as the poetry collection Rage and Desire. Karibu sana, Eric. Thank you. Up next we have Ogutu Muraya on the extreme right. Ogutu Muraya is a storyteller, a performance artist, and a writer with a profound curiosity in the connection between spiritual and the neurological, between realms of thought and meaning, change and understanding. Ogutu's work is embedded in the practice of orature. He researches new forms of storytelling where social, political aspects merge with the belief that art is an important catalyst for questioning certainties. He studied international relations at the USIU, United States International University in Nairobi, Kenya, and graduated from the Academy of Theatre and Dance at the University of Arts in Amsterdam. Karibu sana. Up next, live in our audience here, very amazing friend, Maguette Dieng, aka Mboch. Maguette is a DJ, a selector, and a member of the Joko Collective, who graced us with an amazing performance on the open night, dubbed Organic Intelligence. A Barcelona-based musical artist collective that was set up with the intention and the need to explore and disseminate the most contemporary electronic sounds and the avant-garde scene from the African continent and its diaspora. Maguette is gracing us with her presence today as a very strong community mobilizer who's also worked to bring African artists into the European continent in the forms of cultural exploration and relations. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. And also live and in the flesh, we have Justin Doucet, who is a musical curator and a journalist, has worked on the continent as live performance and music programming head, has honed his skills producing and presenting content in English and in French for radio stations and online platforms such as CBC Podcasts and Boiler Room. Justin has written articles and co-authored op-eds in newspapers and journals such as Le Devoir, Revue Liberty, or Montreal Magazine. I hope I said the French correctly. Justin has curated performances for Suoni, different festivals, Beneath the Baobabs in Nairobi, for Boiler Room, and has worked on campaigns for migrant workers' rights in Montreal, including frontline workers during the pandemic. Karibu sana, Justin Doucet.
Thank you.
Great. So let's delve into the conversation. We will break into a Q&A session after about 40 or so minutes, if time allows. We have a lot to say. We'll try and say it in those 40 minutes. But yes, keep your questions close to you. If you have any comments moving forward or you'd like to reach out to us after the conversation, you're welcome to do so. All right? So I'm going to address the first question to Eric Ogutu Sumba. I'm going to ask you to reintroduce the work that you do. Probably tell us where you're tuning in from right now. And, sorry, I'm so sorry. I think I confused the questions. But I still want you to reintroduce yourself and the work that you're doing at HKW at the moment.
Thank you very much, Emma, and everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I hope I can be heard well. So Eric Otieno Sumba is my name.
Yes.
And as an editor, I am currently working on 4 publications for the upcoming exhibition at Haus der Kultur in der Welt, which deal with a topic that we'll be talking about today, which is migration and freedom of movement and also freedom of return in some ways. So we're working on a project called Echoes of the Brother Countries, looking at the former East German Republic or the German Democratic Republic, and looking at the lives and biographies of Vietnamese, Angolan, Mozambican, and Cuban migrants who settled in the GDR for some time in the 70s and the 80s, and some of whom stayed in the GDR and some of whom, after the GDR collapsed, went back to their countries. But this history is showing us really why it is important to think about freedom of movement and why people move, how they move, what happens when they move, and what happens when they return. So I think it's very much in the frame of what we want to discuss today.
Thank you. Just wanted to delve into where you're at with the intention of asking why the work you're doing in Berlin, why you feel it was important for you to kind of initiate this at the source where you're at right now, as opposed to like, yeah, doing it in Nairobi. Like, what caused this movement for you?
Well, the thing about, so in my own personal experience, I grew up in Kenya and moved to Germany when I was about 18. And this moving or migrating was the most counterintuitive thing I've ever done. So I had never had any intention of leaving or like actually moving. So the concept of migrating is something that I only understood in retrospect. So after I had come to Germany, and then people kind of asking me, okay, why did you come? How long are you staying? When are you going back? All of these things. That's when I kind of grasped the idea of migration as a thing, because I think it's natural for humans to want to travel and move around and, see the other side of the world, basically. But when I moved to Germany, I think the questions kind of led me to understand that we have made it so as human beings that this is no longer a natural thing, at least not for everybody, right? So growing up, it was common for me seeing people from all over the world in Kenya doing all kinds of things, both good and bad, taking pictures of us without asking for permission while playing, all kinds of wild stuff. And then coming here, facing the flip side, basically, of people not understanding that as an 18, 19-year-old African, I would be interested in like just going to a place I've never been, asking me what my motivations are, whether it was hard to come if I came with a boat or a plane, or like all kinds of really weird questions. I think that's when it clicked that movement is afforded to some people or kind of assumed to be available to some people, and not really expected or wanted when some other people, other kinds of people, specifically young Africans in this case, are also doing it. And this led me to, look at migration not just as about an issue of freedom of movement, but also as, it's a repository of stories, because the things that people experience when traveling, when migrating, it's crazy. And many of these stories are actually bottled up and kept in. So I'm speaking from a perspective of here, you meet older people who came to Germany in the 80s, 90s, who have never spoken about their history, right, of moving from their home country, settling in Germany, their academic qualifications being, not recognized, having to redo school or university because their qualifications are not recognized. People have been deported. I've met people in Senegal, for example, who have lived in Europe for a few years and were deported back to their countries. And all of these histories are so hushed down and quiet. And every time I speak to one of these people, I'm amazed at how much is there, how much is kept quiet, and how much we don't know about the experiences of people who have dared to move to a place where, it was not expected that they do. And so I think in my work, I'm very attentive and keen and careful with the stories, because I know that they're important. And I know that these stories kind of enable us to understand how bad it's got in terms of freedom of movement, in terms of the things, the challenges people who move go through in their destination countries, the challenge that people who are mobile go through. So I'm thinking about artists who need to travel for work, the challenges that entails. I think there are a lot of stories to tell there. And I see it as my responsibility in some way to kind of share the stories and contextualize them politically.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. I'll just throw the same question to Ogutu, just to sort of reintroduce the work that you're doing. And I remember having, or being on a panel with you last year at the Goethe Institute, sort of addressing the same topics and issues. And you gave me a book, which was sort of your 5-year musings and just documentation of your thought process in those 5 years. What led you to boycotting the EU after those 5 years?
Hi, everyone. So since I'm actually in Amsterdam now, so maybe let's start there, which means that the boycott changed in its dynamics. But essentially what led to it was I moved to, before coming to Amsterdam, I was working in different scenes in Nairobi. I grew up, born and raised in Kenya also, and then decided to move to Amsterdam to do my master's. And before that, I was in the literary scene, working at Kwani and previously Story Moja, and then also in the theater scene as well. And so the desire then grew to find a place also where I could explore my practice, what that meant, and then that's what has been developing quietly. This I call it a literary performance practice, which is just a dialogue between orature and literature for me, and an exploration of publishing as staging, and throughout that journey and that practice, when I arrived in Amsterdam, one of the first things I noticed was that I was being subjected to different arrival procedures than my classmates. And so it just began by a question of why, like, because I remember being, like my visa was tied into several conditions. One, that I had to be tested for tuberculosis every 6 months of my entire stay as a student, that I had to, like, my birth certificate was older than 6 months, so it needed to be renewed. But that was an entire process that involved like going to where I was born, getting the certificate, the new, taking it to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then taking it to the Dutch embassy to certify and pay to confirm the signature from the ministry, and then bringing it. So it's like there were all these, and there was more, of course. There's much more, and so I started to ask, and then through asking, also I got involved also in other processes and conversations within the Netherlands, because I arrived during also the migration crisis, or the quote unquote migration crisis, and there was thousands of people who are dying in the Mediterranean annually, and also connecting to a group of migrants who are in Amsterdam who have not been allowed. They don't have status, but they're also not allowed to. So they're not allowed to stay, but they also can't go back. So they're in this in-between place where the only right they have is the right for cultural expression. And together with a theater maker called Lara Star, we created I was involved in creating a public court to try Europe for crimes against humanity in relation to the migration crisis. So this is how I got into it. And then, of course, when I was asking why these different arrival procedures, discovered that it's actually a policy. It's called a policy of discouragement. which is to just make things as hard as possible for someone to want to come, and when they come, to make things as hard as possible for them to want to stay. And that, of course, it's applied on a spectrum depending on how you arrive, whether documented or undocumented. And increasingly, it became difficult for me to go through this ritual of needing to validate your existence in order for the system to allow you to be. And that's when I just cracked and I just left Amsterdam. I went back to Nairobi. And then also, as a being in the independent art scene, it means that you're dependent on touring in order for you to earn a living. But that became even harder also without, it's already hard even when you're within Europe, it's already a hard industry to be part of. But now when you're also back, the fact that every time you're invited, you need to get a visa, that also became a problem. So I also made it so I decided to not travel, but that didn't mean to not engage with the scene. So I started to tour the work, but with artists who would perform who would take off my role and perform on my behalf in festivals. And then there was an agreement that every time that the work was done, that the host would read a statement of why I'm not physically there. And then also started to look out also for what is this system actually like, what are we facing, because sometimes there's a feeling like the people inviting you are just as clueless about the institution as you are. And so then there was an offer also to say, what if I didn't have to apply for, what if a visa on arrival was possible, like, or rather like a visa upon departure, like that it's the host who takes on the burden of facing the system, not the artist. And we were to explore that, but of course the system is designed in such a way that such interventions are not possible, because then quickly you'll be told, no, but it's you who have to do it, so then the responsibility is always on the person traveling, and I think there's something there to question. And what happened then after that is also I started to explore the question of migration, but from a completely different context, which is the Comoros archipelago, because there's a parallel migration crisis going on there, where there are 4 islands, same history, same language, same culture, but one, Mayotte stayed as a French territory, and when France entered the Schengen Treaty, it became the southernmost territory of Europe. And then suddenly the other islands needed a visa to enter Mayotte. And since the 90s to now, 50,000 people have drowned there. And so the reason why I started to look at it from that perspective, it's because it's such a bizarre, like suddenly it's a change of a documentation, and suddenly the same people now, there's a difference. And the people in Mayotte also are, they are brought up and educated to now that they are French. But when you come to France, it's not the same. And so it made me realize that maybe this is not a question of just institution, it's also a question of the imagination. So then from there is a story that I'm working on, and it's part of my practice, and it's long term. It's about a character who discovers that they're living in someone else's imagination, and they're trying to find an exit out of this imagination. And they're constantly confronted by the fact that it's possibly an open prison.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's a month last year, I was invited actually to perform at the Cape Verde. And before even being invited here, I didn't know that I had to apply for a visa, but from the French embassy to perform there. So this really just, I had so many questions about that. And as a result, because the French embassy visa applications had been backlogged for a while, even given that I had a full Schengen and I could go to France, I couldn't get the appropriate documentation to go to this island, which is off the coast, the African coast. So, yeah, that's a very interesting piece of work you're on to there. So, yeah, we're looking forward to this. I will just sort of reel this back into the kinds of collaborative efforts that have been started by community organizers from the diaspora and from people on the continent, and how important or not linking peoples who have been restricted from moving, how important it is to make those links by themselves. With Justin, your experience of building community in East Africa speaks to the role of the diaspora. And aside from reintroducing yourself, could you speak on what the importance, the role of the diaspora plays in your work? And if you feel that this is one of the ways we can move towards finding more avenues for pushing for movement in all ways.
Yeah, I can try to address that. So a bit of background on myself. I currently spend a lot of time in Nairobi, which is where I'm based. I'm a music educator there and a curator. I curate live performances and music within the East African arts scene. And the way that I got there is partially through my parents. My father is from Rwanda, and he moved to Canada. He migrated to Canada due to political events and the Rwandan genocide, or the events that would lead to the Rwandan genocide. He came to settle in Ottawa, in Canada, which is the land of the Cree First Nations. So he came as a visitor on the land that belongs to someone else, a land that was colonized. My mother is Polish by blood, but she was adopted by a Franco-Ontarian family. So for people who maybe know the geography of Canada, there's a province called Ontario. Up in the north is the land of the Cree. My father came to settle in Ottawa, which is the land of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin nations. So both of my parents came to Canada as migrants. And I, having this Rwandese heritage, decided to, young adult, being very passionate about music, and also just really enjoying and appreciating all the music that was coming out of Africa. At the time, I wanted to get involved and I wanted to support the music production that was going on in East Africa, rather than just consuming the music from Canada. I wanted to get closer to the musical processes and be in community with other artists. So I took it upon myself to get invested personally and professionally in East Africa. And initially, it was mainly as an artistic pursuit that I wanted to do this, but being somebody who is very much interested in politics and workers' rights, I rapidly understood there's a working class dimension to the production of culture as well. And I worked both in Canada and elsewhere on migrants' rights. Kind of came together as I started understanding the barriers that migrants faced coming to Canada and making parallels to artists that work within Africa, artists whose work is highly valuable and contributes a lot to the local economies in North America and in Europe. I think people often don't necessarily understand or realize the scope of the economic contributions to artists and culture, African culture, African food, African music, African fashion. These are industries that generate lots and lots of revenues, and yet the producers of those goods, services, those crafts still face lots of barriers to movement. So this is kind of the lens that I come to this work with, and most recently moving from a place of maybe more activism, shifting from what I saw in Canada as a racial discrimination and over-policing of migrant communities, understanding and working more on detention and deportations as the main form of policing and discrimination that migrants face. So these detentions are arbitrary detentions, which I think both of our panelists online have alluded to. This is these arbitrary detentions are a way of controlling the movements of people and deporting them sometimes back to very dangerous conditions in their home country, and often doing so in violation of the human right to movement and to free movement, which is enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of I think Article 13, the freedom of movement of people. So I'll park it there, and yeah, I'm curious to hear what Mbok has to say.
Yes, I will extend the same question to you. Someone who's also pushed for the movement and for the collaboration in person of an African artist, not one, but two. In one case, that was successful, in the other, it was not. So perhaps you can speak on that and a bit more about what you do and your heritage.
Yeah. Well, my name is Maguette, and I'm part of the Joko collective. We are a collective based in Barcelona, and it's been 7 years now that we are working on supporting, spreading, and trying to make connections with African artists or people from the diaspora in Europe. We do many things, but lately we have been like in a place where we had the opportunity to bring artists to Barcelona and Spain in general. So we had the opportunity to program festivals and events, and it was a challenge to think and sometimes overthink the ways to do it, to do like a win-win relationship, let's say, because sometimes, and well, actually a lot of times, when it comes to like curators, even black curators in Europe, I feel like we don't really think about the possibilities we can create in other people's lives. I'm not talking from a savior perspective. I don't want to sound like this, but our decisions have consequences, and if we are not really like pushing to support the mobility of those artists in the continent, it's like for me, it's like we are failing really in this exchange where we are taking a lot, and somehow we have the right because we are also part of the continent, of course, with different advantages. But in general, if you are moving around Europe in the festivals, music ecosystem, you can see how all or most of the music you hear in the festivals is black or African music, because there is like every year different genres appearing in the continent. So it's the most creative place when it comes to music and new stuff coming out every year. So you attend those festivals and you see people playing like amapiano, chicom, you name it. Also, most of them non-Africans or even non-black people. So as you say, no, there is like a big monetization of the African arts, African creativity happening in Europe and around the world, and but the people creating that is not really seeing that benefit, that success. So I think that it's our role as curators and just consumers of those things to support those artists and to bring them here. So we, for example, last year we had this proposal from Sonar Festival to make a residency in. We could choose the place, so we end up choosing like Nairobi. And this is how we get to meet you and and Monrea and Mary also. And for them, it was more like the idea of a Spanish collective going there somehow to, put the Spanish name project like out of Spain. So it's like they are supporting like people from Catalonia and Spain to make residencies outside, but more from a perspective of having their like name under a project. And for us was very important to make sure that the deal had to be, okay, we're gonna go there, we're gonna make this project, but we are also gonna bring the artists to present the piece with ourselves in the festival. Otherwise, it's not gonna be fair, to just arrive to a place we don't know, to extract a story, to create a narrative, like a project, artistic project, then present it in a festival that is like a very powerful and rich festival, and that have the power to also economically move situation where the artists can go to Barcelona to present the piece. So we were insisting in that, and finally it was successful, but it was also successful because there was someone in the team that it's called Ikram, that it's part of the booking team, that is a friend that is also part of the diaspora. She's like a Moroccan woman, and she was familiar to those discriminations. So she could like have more empathy about this issue and push personally inside of the organization, like make calls to the Spanish embassy in Nairobi and really push like in an individual level to make this thing happen. So yeah, I also wanted to say this because she was crucial in the success of this, in having the presence of Muraya in the performance. And yeah, maybe if it wasn't because of her being part of the team and being like, supporting us and really like being aware about this global situation, it would have been maybe a different story. Or if we were finding another person in the team, that would have been like, okay, oh, this is not possible, let's just book another artist that is going to be in Europe, that is going to be easier to have in the festival, so we don't have to call every morning to the embassy. So no, that's the easy way. So we need to, as part of the diaspora, I feel like we had this compromise with those artists we're taking a lot from. In the case of Mary, it was not successful. We tried and we tried for months. But at the end, it was like this problem with the passport and with I don't know if it was the materials to print the passport. Yeah, all those stories that we all the time find there. But we could find a way to somehow bring her to the performance, which was nice. We decided that in the last minute because until the end we didn't know she wouldn't be able to come. Mm-hmm. So we were video calling her. It was very like that, but we were like she did a composition to use in the performance. So we were putting her composition. We were video calling her, and she was explaining her contribution. So at least it was something. Again, we could have been like, okay, you cannot come, so let's do our thing, whatever. But it was like, no, let's make it, in another way. So I think that it's about really like, I don't know, just think about those details and to take care of those things, which for me are very important in our work as a collective, as a Black collective from the diaspora. Yeah, supporting the artists.
Cool. Thank you, and thank you for just taking on the responsibility, even knowing that it could be challenging. Because what Maguette was saying, one of the artists who was supposed to collaborate with the Joko Collective from Nairobi, Kenya, couldn't come because they could not get their passport. And it kind of even drives the movement restriction problem further internally to our country. In this case, we're not dealing with like visa, EU, Schengen immigration. We're dealing with our own, immigration authorities, and the reasons were just ridiculous. I won't share. You can Google. They were all over the place. Yeah, there was no paper. At some point, there was no booklets for printing the passports. It's wonderful. Yeah, for 6 months, it's really amazing. And just to also add to what you were saying about just staying persistent and not taking the easy way route of being someone who's easily accessible. You've managed to do this with an African artist. Eric has also facilitated my performance in Berlin when I played there last year because of partly because of Eric. I wanted to just speak on what you feel about what meaningful allyship could look like, because as somebody who's working on the continent, that is also part of the reason that is causing my movement to be restricted and super hard, but pushing for day-to-day, speaking on these issues, writing about these issues, and also just throwing in suggestions to programmers and curators at places like HKW. What does meaningful allyship look like to you? That's one question. And the second part of this question is, owing to the work that you've done in studying the political economy, I'm assuming of more than one demographic globally. How does this tie into movement restriction? How does this affect what comes out of meaningful allyship? How does this affect the work that we seek to do but we don't get to do because we can't move around? Yeah.
I think I caught most of the first question and all of the second question. So if I miss the answer, please let me know. So in terms of what we're doing at HKW, I think as an institution, we're in a very interesting position because the flights for the people we book, so be it artists or performers, are paid by the Federal Foreign Office, which basically finances our work. So I think our situation is special in that way because if they deny somebody a visa whose flight they booked, we have a different way of broaching the subject towards the Foreign Office as any other institution could. So basically, we go to them and say, hey, you booked their flight like 2 weeks ago and their visa has just been denied by your colleagues in Nairobi or whichever city. And then obviously, it's a very different situation that can be addressed as opposed to a situation where, the Foreign Office is not involved at all in the institution. This, of course, means that the idea of visa denials, or like the concept of visa denials, which is becoming very arbitrary, very unpredictable, there's no clear rationale or transparent criteria for accepting or denying a visa. There's a lot of information, sometimes even contradicting information on several websites. But then at the end of the day, it's never really clear why somebody got a visa this time and got denied a visa the next time. And this, of course, is difficult to work with in many, many ways. It makes it impossible to plan long term because you can only, there are specific visa timelines that, clash with institutional timelines on our side, for example. So this is something we're trying to raise over and over again to make sure that people understand how crazy it is, like as a system, and how far-reaching its effects are for us, for artists, for example. People who have been working on something for months and then don't get a visa. It's ridiculous. So it makes it very, very difficult for us to actually be an attractive partner to artists working in different parts of the world, because they're going to say, okay, if you can guarantee my visa, then I'm not sure I'm interested in working with you, which is a very fair point. So I think we try and make this clear at every opportunity, and kind of push for change in this sector. But it's, of course, almost a winning battle. It's very difficult to kind of see things moving and like reforms happening in the sector. Another issue that makes it even harder is the privatization of visa services. So where like the government outsources the visa process completely to a private company, which is profit oriented and is not interested in, because every time you criticize the process, they just say, hey, please address the embassy or please address the government X for this. So that makes it extremely hard to kind of get accountability and really, advance. For the second question, in terms of things that can actually be done, I think what Ogutu said earlier about the crisis of the imagination, I think that's powerful. And I say this because I was recently requested to write something for 8-year-olds about that explains like what a visa is. And when I say I struggled, I did write something. It's coming out soon, but it was the hardest thing I've ever written in my life. Because how do you explain to an 8-year-old that there are borders? How do you explain to them that some people can cross these borders without a piece of paper and others cannot? Without explaining racism and colonialism also, by the like it was crazy. And this piece really showed me how absurd borders are, also in terms of time, because if you think about 30, 40, 50 years ago, you could travel from Nairobi to London without a visa. So these things are very recent and very new. And that for me, of course, means that it's possible to, go back to a time or like rewind the clock somehow to a time where, these things are possible again, because they have been possible before, and I believe they can be possible again. But it needs a lot of vision, a lot of arguments, a lot of strategy, a lot of work, which is exhausting, because this is like in my work at HKW, like my work is I'm an editor, right? That's what I should be doing 40 hours a week. So any work I'm doing for following up on somebody's visa is on top. It's actually unpaid work, right? And this is something that a lot of us who work in the diaspora are doing. And this is not a complaint. It's just like highlighting. It's an actual job. Like they should be an actual position of somebody who does nothing else but follow up on visa applications. And the moment you start rationalizing and quantifying this labor in this way, I think then it becomes clear for the first time how much work, how much effort it takes to run a system of visas. And it's annoying. I mean, the reason why governments are outsourcing visas to private companies is that governments don't have time and mind space to deal with this. It's a very annoying thing. I mean, I applied for a visa for 3 days to go to the UK, and somebody works on it for what, a week, like looking at my papers, looking at everything I submitted. And, it's at the volume is just insane for a relatively small amount of time. So I think efficiency-wise, it doesn't really make sense. So it would make more sense for governments to kind of scale down visa regimes rather than like drive them up. And outsourcing will also not be a solution, because with time it just gets too expensive, because companies will get better and better at asking for more and more money to kind of do this very annoying work. And it's possible because people can come to Kenya, for example, without visas. So why shouldn't it be the other way around? So I think we need more imagination. We need to raise this issue at every opportunity, especially citizens of EU countries, the US, etc. This thing has to be present. It has to be a topic. Like, it can't be the people who are affected always raising the issue. It has to be people sitting within these governments, within ministries, within cultural institutions, kind of making the claim and putting it at the top of the agenda, for it to become, a topic that's not easily dismissed or forgotten. And also supporting artists, going out of your way to support artists as an institution, and making that billable time and saying, hey, I spent like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days actually working on one visa application, and I think this needs to be concrete so that people understand the scale of the madness of the visa regime. So, yeah.
Thank you. I would like to maybe present something we had discussed in one of our earlier panels last year, which was the AU 2063 agenda, for us to be fully visa-free and with an African passport that would allow us to just jump in and out of each other's countries without having to be asked annoying questions at the border. And I see some countries like, for example, Kenya, South Africa have taken steps towards being visa-free. However, when I was looking at some of the reasons why other countries are a bit skeptical to make the move right now and have given this timeline to 2063, who knows whether we'll be here. Like, they themselves, first of all, they're so old, who knows, they will be there to see this through, sorry. And one of the reasons was, aside from just feeling like, because some countries are so unstable, there would be influxes of migrants into the countries that were seen as being more stable, whether it be economically or politically. Peace, in some regions is not a given, with a lot of interference in those countries. So they were like, if we open these borders, all these people come in, and then what do we do? They take everything, and then what happens? So just wanted to throw this question to anyone on the panel who is aware of this agenda. Do you believe that, the current steps being made are made with the intention of us actually being like, able to move freely by 2063? Or do you think in some cases it's just a bit of a political show? Or how valid are these reasonings that are being given for people to move in and out, or to not move in and out? I'm not sure who wants to go first.
I would
Justin?
like to.
Okay, Justin can go first.
I think this the AU, the African Unions, has been bringing up this idea of a visa-free Africa for a while. Some countries are moving towards it. It does seem like a lot of political posturing. It's not clear whether or not these things will materialize. But the project itself is not a new one. I think since the 50s, Pan-African thought and Pan-African thought leaders have been really pointing towards abolishing these systems and these controls over travel. The same way the European Union is already letting workers and goods flow freely. I think looking towards Africa within the continent is already something that would benefit artists greatly, just because the barriers to entry could be a lot smaller, but also because there's so much to be gained from cross-pollinating, and for the regional economies, for artists to be able to travel. The barriers to entry for a Kenyan who wants to go to Mali or to even closer into neighboring country are actually quite high, and the costs are prohibitive. And I think having these trade agreements or regional cooperation would be a really great first step. So because it would reduce the dependence on European nations and North American countries as well for artistic work. Why can't we perform regionally? Why can't there be high demand for artists on their own continent? I think in terms of valuing culture as well, I think there's been a problem over decades of time. See that African art and African culture is not valued unless it's being noticed or it's being valued economically by the West, which means that practitioners, cultural practitioners, their own artistic practices are becoming distorted. And we see a lot more African, I see it with my students. I teach a lot of electronic musicians. I see them gravitating towards specific music styles. They live somewhere where there's a multitude of different genres of music, but they gravitate towards the ones that are commercially viable in the West. And that's not a bad thing in itself, but when you start to lose some of the culture that is, actually grounded in some of the kids that I teach, they're not close to their own culture. They're more drawn towards West African, Afropop, or South African music. It's a beautiful influence that is there, but I think there's definitely a richness that is lost. And if you look at any self-respecting nation in Europe, they have these policies in place. They have cultural ministries in place with clear guidelines and resources that they put towards actually preserving their cultural heritage, to literally protect themselves from the influence of their neighboring countries. They don't get completely assimilated culturally. That doesn't exist in a meaningful way, especially for contemporary culture in Africa right now. So I think I see a lot of value in actually strengthening internal cooperation, economic and cultural ties within Africa.
Thank you. Just made me think of a quote I'd seen on a film about how the fastest way to sort of destabilize a people or to, destroy any chances of dreaming or thinking about realities that you could achieve through dreaming is to destroy that sense of self. And without being able to move around and to meet, say, Maguette, I probably would have no opportunity of learning something about myself, and vice versa. If that had been stripped away from me culturally, I could have an opportunity to recreate or reimagine my existence and therefore regain a sense of self. And so I feel like the role that arts and culture play are important enough to be included in some of these, future agendas for us as a people. Arts and culture has a very small space, if none at all. I don't think it's been added on this actual AU Agenda 2063. It's currently focused on opening up borders for trade, for making money, and for, commercial purposes, fueling capitalism. Let's keep it moving, and whereas that, allows a society to progress and to develop and to, be able to afford things that can help sustain the self. If you have no sense of the self, what are you sustaining and why? So I feel like it is great that a lot of the countries are taking these steps. However, artists need to also be at the table when these conversations are being heard, and not necessarily from a means of making money from the arts, which I feel something else we need to get ready for once these borders open. So we have about 15 minutes to go. I wanted to check in with our online team if you also have any thoughts about whether the Agenda AU 2063 is just a pipe dream, something that can be actualized. Having an African passport, is it just a political move for some of these people who are opening up their borders? Yes, that's the question. That's the last question before we get into a Q&A section.
So the question, if I think I heard it correctly, is whether it's a pipe dream or whether it's it has any validity.
Yes.
For me, I think maybe I'll take it back because I feel like COVID was one of the moments where everyone in the world understood what it was like to be a restricted body and what that means. And it's no longer something that, because maybe previously before that, when you talked about resistance space, like what is this? So it has to, for it not to be a pipe dream, it has to resonate in that way, like in a way where it's, because it's not enough. It's not enough to say that you're going to do this in 2063. I think the change has to be really from that point of understanding, from the educational aspect, from the way, because even the way the history is told here is very different. So it has to be something that shifts, not just policy, but culturally, politically, economically. But the challenge is that it's shifting not out of all those reasons. It's shifting for economic reasons. And then there is where the question comes in: is it genuine? And I don't know.
Maguette, Eric.
Yeah, I think for me also it will be something positive, of course. Even like I remember I supposed to go to South Africa with Baba, and well, this time that time was my fault because I was checking a website, and for me, well, it was saying that I didn't need a visa to travel to South Africa. I was assuming that Baba, as a Senegalese person, also he wouldn't be like in need of that. And I was checking like quick a website and BAT actually. So when we arrived to the airport, they were blocking us, saying that Baba couldn't travel without visa, and I was very surprised because he's from Senegal, South Africa is in Africa, and I was like, how can I travel there and he don't? So yeah, we had to go back, and yeah, it was sad, but yeah, it was shocking, and it was showing me how crazy the system works, and so yeah, I would be happy to see every African person move freely inside of the continent, because I mean it makes sense. Yeah, I don't know if I can say much than that, but yeah, I mean it's time for that, definitely.
Thank you.
I just remembered from the first question that you asked. I really liked what Maguette said in terms of things that we can do, making sure that the African artists who, European artists or European-based artists or people in the diaspora, when you collaborate with these artists, make sure that they get a stake within the artistic project you make. Don't invite people as collaborators and then exclude them from performances or representing the art. Don't exclude them from opportunities. And it shouldn't just be don't exclude them. It should be imagine yourself as having a burden of doing everything you can to include them proactively as much as possible, knowing that they have all these restrictions. How far can you go to make sure that they are included? That's kind of like a perspective shift I would encourage as a solution to these. We can't change all the visa requirements right now, but as artists, as curators, as people within the arts industry, we can shift our mindset when we are collaborating with African cultural practitioners. Working from the diaspora for myself, I try to think about how I can lend my resources and my time, avoid starting projects from scratch, but seeing how I can lend my time and resources to other people's existing projects if we align on values and objectives, understanding that whatever idea you might have, somebody in Africa is probably already working on something very similar. So why not work together as opposed to just, like, oh yeah, I started my own graphic design company. It's shifting your mindset like this, I think, is interesting. Building long term, I think, is another one. Making sure to build institutions and structures rather than one-time initiatives. So instead of starting a festival or an event series that you might try to do once and incorporate African artists or cultural practitioners, think of how you can set up a network with recurring opportunities so that you actually scale up what is possible on the ground. Again, it means that the artists don't depend on funding coming in from outside, opportunities coming in from Europe, really building infrastructure on the continent. And then the last thing would be, let me cut it there because I've spoken quite a bit.
So good. Yeah, I said we had time, but we don't have time. But we had time. Time is running out. It's okay. It's fine. But that's the beauty of what we're doing right now is that this is not a one-time conversation. And we've been having more plans, especially with Eric, to continue these conversations as part of the Pass series of events, which happen and exist right now in like just banter over cell phone conversations, and when we meet randomly in different spaces. But is currently evolving into a more tangible resource, which will take the shape of a website where, if you are an African artist looking to travel either to the Western world or within the continent, you can look to this resource, download the information that you would need to move around, which can include current up-to-date visa regulations for some of these countries that you're looking to move to, any developments that we will be discussing via our conversations will be hosted on the website, so you'll be able to find these conversations up there as we move forward. Speaking on meaningful allyship, this is not a paid sponsorship, but I'm going to big up Norient because first and foremost, I met the director of Norient in Kenya. Came to Kenya to speak to artists about their art, and it wasn't a touch and go sort of relationship. It was something that has sprung into so many other relationships, including myself being here as artistic director of a festival in a foreign country in Europe, coming from being restricted, boarding an airline to Europe. So it's a bit surreal, but it's possible. And it's only possible with intentionality. And so this is a great example of how meaningful allyship can work between artists in Europe and in Africa and other marginalized communities. Thirdly, I would like to invite maybe one or two questions before I invite closing statements. My amazing panel of artists who I respect dearly, and thank you so much for being here. If anyone has any questions or comments, we can take them really quickly before we wrap up.
Hello, my name is Baba. My question is for the festival. Would be nice to know, for example, some artists can come in these years because for the problem from the passport for the visa. I want to know if it's this festival, not only this one, or the European festival, flow after the festival to bring the artists and the next time. Because that's important, because you can lose your opportunity for the visa. That's the question.
Thank you, Baba. If I understand the question, because Marie was supposed to come and then she wasn't able to come, will Norient follow through and try and invite Marie for a future opportunity? Yeah. Yes. Would someone from Norient want to answer this question?
I have a feedback here. To be honest, not sure. I think in theory, yes, for sure. But I gave away the artistic director, so she is deciding basically. No, but normally yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, we try to do that. And basically we are a bit on the side of your friend inside Sonar. I think we were always, in the history, working hard to somehow find a way. So we would try to call and find out if we find someone that is close to the Swiss ambassador or something. And then we would call them over Christmas. And then somehow it often worked out. But I think it's important that the festival pushes. I think it's what you were saying as well.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thank you, Thomas. And yes, I feel like even in this particular situation, both Hannes and Leah from B-Flat really pushed to try and bring Marie over. But I said for her situation, it's even more complex because now it moves further back to Kenya. So it's perhaps for me to go to Nyayo House immigration office and be like, Wagwan, where's the passports? Like, what's going on here? But all this to say that for all promoters or programmers, festival curators here, if it seems impossible, what more can you do together now, because each person is struggling individually. Leah even had to up the fees to ensure that either Montreal or was coming all the way from Kenya. The flights are expensive, accommodation, we have to host somebody here, like there's the fees for performing, like all those things. Why do you also have to shoulder that yourself as a festival curator who's also maybe not doing very well financially here as well? So it's super complex, but as if it's up to me, Marie is coming back next sometime. We need to do something this year, and I'm happy to say that I'm working with a very supportive and collaborative team here. Yes, anyone else with some comments, questions, a song?
I have a question. I didn't get it really well when the EU agenda is 36 or 63.
2063, the Africa we want.
It sounds really like a bad joke, and this means that the children of your children will get a visa. Oh, yeah, perhaps.
Yes, yeah, it's fully. You can even download it. I have the English version, and it's about 24 pages. Very colorful, very nice. But yeah, if it sounds like a joke, it's a bit worrying for us now. But yeah, I feel like maybe in some ways weighing out all of the issues that affect the countries that are to open up their borders, the issues that don't necessarily rely on us solving our problems, but also a lot of international interference, you know? It's multiple layers of political interference that have to be undone. And then healing, you know? You can go for therapy one session and be like, I'm healed, and then you're just not for years and years. It's like people who have been subjected to so much trauma, so much interference, so much injustice are supposed to now regroup, open their borders and just operate nicely and, you know, it's, I mean, realistically speaking, it would take maybe a lot longer. But I do get what you're saying, that, you know, it seems like so far away. But yeah, time will come, but we need to take like appropriate steps from now, yeah, to get there.
Yeah, and I think I would double down on what Emma has said about like Norient Festival being kind of like an outlier in the current arts and culture industry. We don't see a lot of organizations that move with the intention that they have with the global community that they work with. And the role of curators, programmers, decision makers becomes really crucial, because when Emma is saying that there's a lot of political interference in African countries, it starts with a political interference, economic interference, and the culture is downstream from all of that. And so it becomes really important for countries that don't have that autonomy to control their own cultural industries, to control their own culture, that artists and cultural practitioners have strong allies internationally amongst other artists and amongst festivals and industry players. So if the practices can change internationally until, inshallah, one day, these countries are actually able to guide their own destinies. We're looking at cultural practitioners and art that is coming from countries that have layers and layers of political destabilization within them. People's lives are destabilized, people's economies are destabilized. This is where the art is actually coming from. So to reckon with that, I think it's the best thing that we can do is to like work together as allies with clear minds and clear consciences about what we're doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, so time is finally up, and I will invite my friends to make a very brief closing statements. Perhaps I will start with Maguette.
Wow, pressure. No, I would say, yeah, let's just keep going with just pushing for, yeah, to make like a more fair collaborations, to overthink. Like the other day, and we, as a collective, we have a lot of discussions, and sometimes it's hard because, you know, 6 different minds going to different places, but it's good to just discuss a lot until a point you overthink, even if you are tired. But it's nice, it's cool to really think about a lot of aspects when it comes to, especially when you have the power of create situations. So let's overthink a lot about how we can make things in a more, better way, and like make the deals for everybody in this arts ecosystem.
Thank you. Eric?
I think if we accept that Africa is the future, it's something I very much accept, then I think it is our duty to innovate the area of freedom of movement. We know how it feels like not to be able to move freely. We know how it feels like to fill in ridiculous visa applications, to pay ridiculous amounts of money, which we don't even have most of the time, to travel to a place for 3 days, 4 days. It's impossible. So knowing all of that, I think we're in a very special and unique position to kind of show the world that it is possible to do this differently. And I have experienced this twice, and I must say I felt invincible. I got into Rwanda and to Ghana without a visa. And I swear, like I was riding that way for like 2 weeks, and I felt like I'm completely I was like I'm Superman. I can do everything. I got into a country without a visa, and there was no stress at the border. Like for my Pan-African heart, that was, incredible. So I think if we make this continent wide, I think we'll as Africans we'll really have confidence, and it will be innovation, and it will show other countries that it's actually possible. We don't have to subject ourselves to the troubles that many other countries are subjecting us to. We can decide as Africans to kind of lead the way and innovate, and have a border-free Africa by as soon as possible, latest 2063.
Thank you. Ogutu.
Yeah. I was watching Our Planet 2, which is about how movement is important, not just for human life, but for all life on the planet, and how also the impact of that has also influenced other mobilities. Not the human influence is impacting other mobilities of other animals. So it's something that is as vital to life as any other thing. And I think the more we integrate and understand its vitality, the more we can ease off the restrictions that are around it. And indeed, it always starts home, and that's where you make the change. So for the Pan-African movement that is pushing for the African EU passport for freedom of regional, whether regional or intercontinental, I think the more that this can be encouraged, is the better for everyone. Also, I was involved in a different project, which was also looking at mobility, but also reasons why people don't, the difficulties of moving and what the options also. So there are other reasons why someone can't also travel easily, whether that is family or illness or disability or political. Hello, am I still there?
Yes.
You can hear me, yes. So I think, and so there's a website we designed called Showing Without Going, which is also saying, how can we look also at practices of sharing liveness from distances, and what would that look like? And how can, and beyond just sharing a documentation of our work. So I think those are like, there's a need to approach this from multiple perspectives.
Thank you, Ogutu. And yes, last but not least, Justin, any closing remarks?
I feel like I spoke a lot at the end there, but yeah, thanks for bringing.
Seems like we lost our host.
Oh no.
Hiya.
Can you guys hear us still?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd just say that it was really great and enlightening hearing all of the other panelists. Check. Can you guys hear us online? Can you hear us?
Hi. Can you hear us?
Test 1 2. You guys hear us? No? I think everything's been said. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for bringing all of these conversations to light. Free movement for all peoples, free movement for African peoples, and more African arts, and more art from everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to the space. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for for also just allowing us the space to have this discussion. To the Norient team, as you all know, the program is still ongoing, and we have an amazing club night where we can dance and think about animal farm and ways for free movement and happiness and equality moving forward. Just for anyone who's interested in following the conversation, like I said, this is not the only one we're going to have. You can feel free to hit me up online or to Google Pass, which is on IG. The page is a bit empty, but the website is coming up soon. So you can follow Norient. We'll keep Norient updated with our movements, and you can find more information there moving forward. Yeah, thank you.
Free movement.
Free movements for all people. Movement.